So Houston, we have a problem. So over the last couple of weeks, my team has been informing me that a lot of the applications we've been getting have been containing a lot of the same keywords. And this keyword that you can see is the keyword vulnerable or emotional vulnerability. And so when we ask these people, where did you get this from? How are so many people suddenly having applications with emotional vulnerability or variations of? And a lot of them say that it comes from a certain coach and certain videos of that coach where they're telling people to be emotionally vulnerable because women like men who are able to be emotionally vulnerable, who can talk about their feelings, etc., which is not a bad advice in itself. But the problem now is that a lot of people are taking that video or taking that advice and doing the wrong things out of it and doing more harm than good. And that's what happened to a lot of my clients here, where they come to our program and saying, hey, me trying to be vulnerable is not working. In fact, it's making things worse. What am I doing wrong? Is because when you are emotionally vulnerable in the wrong ways, that could actually backfire more than it does help. And in this video too, I'll also show you why when you get hung up on all these buzzwords that a lot of people like to use, most of these buzzwords are quite useless. But let me show you also why this can only confuse you, but also make things a lot more complicated and actually make things backfire on you a lot more. And so a lot of you guys are complaining that this process of saving relationships seems to be very, very difficult, is because a lot of us are trying to focus on so many terms all at once, thinking that we need to do all of it. But really, in our experience, saving a relationship is really being a master at doing a few things, but doing those few things very, very well. So I don't want this same confusion to happen to you. So with that said, let's get into this video. Before I start there, always, if you enjoy content like this, if you want to learn more content like this, then feel free to subscribe to this channel. Also click the bell button as well to be notified when I post new videos every single week. It really helps the channel out, guys. And if you want to dive deeper into anything that we talked about in this video, feel free to leave a comment below, or also feel free to check out our masterclass on the 5 proven steps to rebuilding your relationship from the ground up. And at the end of the masterclass, we'll show you how to apply for the program if you're interested in doing so. So again, the main topic for this video is emotional vulnerability, or the wrong one. Is that killing your relationship? So let's talk about what I mean when I say the wrong kinds of emotional vulnerability. So we have to understand here that when you have the wrong how behind something, you'll struggle under any what. And if you have the right how, you will thrive under any what. So I get a lot of questions, for example, from people asking me, hey, can I say this? Or does it look weak if I say this? Does it look weak if I say that? Well, to be honest, you can say the exact same words with the right how that sounds powerful, that sounds untethered, that sounds genuine. And whatever you say, you'll make it sound good. But if you can say the exact same words, but with the wrong tones, with the wrong how, with the wrong micro expressions, with the wrong place, with the wrong intentions, then that same words can really backfire on you. So when you talk about emotional vulnerability, that is really a matter of what. That is what you're doing. But it's really how you show your emotional vulnerability that is the key thing. So a lot of people listen to these videos and think like, oh, so you're saying that if I just show a bit more emotional vulnerability, then my partner will suddenly feel safe with me and suddenly like see me differently. That's not it. Emotional vulnerability is just a conduit. So saying you just need to be more emotionally vulnerable, as we'll see, is a bit absurd. So there's a few precursor understanding that we need to understand. So number one, we need to understand that emotional safety is the foundation to all thriving relationships. And so if you're not familiar with this principle, I'm not going to go into this video too deep into it because I've already have a masterclass on this. So if you're not familiar with the principles of the 5 pillars and why the 5 pillars are the only things you need in a relationship, nothing more, nothing less, I literally mean that, and why they're ordered this way, why you have to build it in this order, and why safety is really the foundation behind those 5 pillars, then you can join me in my masterclass. I'm not going to go too deep into it here. And as we said in the masterclass too, in order for you to build the right 5 pillars or to rebuild it, you need to have the foundations of those 5 pillars, which are the internal shifts. And right now, guys, we have a video series on these internal shifts. So if you go to my channel, for example, and you just look at this internal shifts to save your marriage, we have ordered for you all the videos and parts for you. And these are very in-depth videos, as you can tell, all about these internal shifts. So if you have any questions or if you're not sure what these internal shifts are, go here, go to my page and watch this series right here. Very, very crucial. But again, once you understand this flow, you'll also begin to easily understand how the wrong kinds of emotional vulnerability can either create or destroy safety. For example, in my life, I used to be someone who was very stoic back then, didn't express my emotions too much. And I was told the same thing. I was told, hey, you need to be more emotionally vulnerable, emotionally expressive as a man. I think women like men who are emotionally expressive. So I tried to be emotionally expressive. But the problem was that my emotions were very victim based. So whenever things got really difficult, for example, whenever I was tired, whenever life got really complicated, whenever I was going through really difficult times, I would feel like really pressured. I would feel very hopeless. I would feel very angry. Sometimes I would feel very lazy. I would feel very tired. I would feel exhausted. I would feel just down on myself. I would feel very depressed. And in fact, I was struggling a lot with depression and anxiety a lot when I was younger. So I thought that being emotionally vulnerable was just me talking about just how sad, how depressed, how hopeless, how difficult things are, and expressing those things. But I realized that saying those things, being vulnerable about those wrong emotions, made my partner feel very unsafe because it's giving her the message here that my man, the king of this kingdom, the leader of this relationship, the person I'm supposed to feel safe with, he doesn't really know how to handle difficult moments. I mean, imagine, for example, that you're working for a company, for a person, for a boss, or working with someone, not even working for someone. And every single time shit hits the fan and things become difficult, they are vulnerable about how hopeless they feel, about how overwhelmed they feel, about how angry they feel. Would that make you feel safer to talk to that person, to work with that person about problems, to share problems to that first person, to whenever you have bad news, for example, to share that bad news with that person? No, because you don't know how that person's going to take it. And history has proven that that person has not been able to take it very well in the first place. Another example of toxic emotional vulnerability, and I used to do this a lot, is when you use it as a counterattack, for example. So my partner would tell me that she's feeling very overwhelmed, she's feeling very sad, she's feeling very depressed, she's feeling like this relationship isn't going anymore. She's feeling like there's not really a lot of passion, and she did say all these things to me back then. And the thing that I would say too, because I was trying to be emotionally vulnerable, was I would say, well, I feel the same way too. And I see a lot of couples arguing the same way too, where their partner would express something and they would say, well, I feel the same way too. And if you think about it, that is a conversation stopper. You don't really know, either person doesn't really know what to say from there, other than, okay, so we're both vulnerable. So we're both wounded. So the wounded cannot help the wounded. And next time, if I tell you I'm wounded and this is the best response I can give you, that it becomes about you now, why would I share? Why would I feel safe to share my emotions with you in the future? Because nothing good happens when I share. And there are many, many more examples of how emotional vulnerability, when it's bred out of victim mindset, when it's bred out of FAE bias, when it's bred out of tetheredness, for example, can become quite unhealthy and will ruin safety, will ruin admiration, will ruin alignment, will ruin sexual passion, etc. So I want you to try to comment below. What are some ways that you have let this understanding of emotional vulnerability kind of steer you the wrong way? Maybe now you're giving yourself excuses to be vulnerable about emotions that may not have created safety. Comment below. I would love to hear from you what ways this emotional vulnerability BS has really pointed you in the wrong way. Now, the thing about emotional vulnerability too is that not only can it be wrong, but when it's done in the wrong way, a lot of people tend to be very blind and helpless to it. And this usually happens because of three reasons. So let's address this helplessness portion for a little bit. So, we always said in our modules here that your actions that you do are really bred by your emotions. And your emotions are really bred by your interpretations, and your interpretations are bred by your paradigms. And again, if you're not familiar with this, go to our internal shift series. This will make a lot of sense for you once you go there. So sometimes, like a lot of people, they tend to be emotionally vulnerable in the wrong ways, and they can't help it. So the action here is negative, but they can't help it. And they can't help it because they already feel a certain emotion, and they already feel a certain emotion because of the way they interpret the world, because of their paradigms. So a great example of this is people who are depressed, and I used to be depressed too, and I understand how this feels very, very well, is that when I was depressed, when my emotions was depressed, I used to either not take action a lot or take action from that depressed place. And I knew in my mind that I needed to take more healthy actions, better actions, uh, bigger actions, whatever it is, but I just could not bring myself into it. And I kept taking non-action or taking the wrong actions, even though I knew in my mind, in my logical mind, that that was the right action to do. But I couldn't help it anyway. Why? Because my emotions were already depressed. Why? Because the way I interpret the world was depressed. And why? Because my paradigms of the world, poisoned by the victim mindsets, the DODs, etc., made me very, very depressed. And at that time, people could be telling me left and right here that, oh, life is actually very beautiful. You shouldn't feel that way about life. You shouldn't think that way about life. But for me, my emotions, my paradigms, my interpretations was my reality. You cannot convince me otherwise that how darkly I felt about the world was wrong. And this is why people are so helpless to any issues with um, matters of feelings, because whatever feelings they have. So let's say right now your partner wants a divorce or your partner is having an affair, whatever it is, you cannot help but feel something. And you will, in your internal state, feel like whatever you feel is justified, is right. And you will tell yourself, of course, I will feel this. What do you think? Every man who is in this situation would feel this. But that's not always true. It's just how you see it. It's truth to you. It's it's what you feel right now. You're biased by that. But that brings me to the second reason why a lot of people remain blind to it is because there is an allure to playing that victim. Going back to when I was depressed, for example, I used to really hate it when other people tried to get me out of my depression. Because, it's a sick feeling, but secretly, if I am depressed, if I feel depressed and I convince myself and other people that I have the depression and my depression is, I can't fix it. I can't do anything about it. It's just the way I am. It's just the way things are. I just have to accept it. Even though that's a sad fact to realize, it's also a very nice thing to realize, because if I cannot do anything, if there's nothing that can be done to change my depression, then I cannot blame myself for doing nothing about my depression. Other people cannot blame me for doing nothing about my depression, because there's nothing to do about the depression. And it got to the point that is so bad to where when other people were telling me that my depression wasn't real, that my depression, I can get out of it, it's a choice thing, I would actually get offended at that. And I would tell them, like, how dare you? So this happens too with a lot of people in this field, where I tell people, for example, oh, your wife wants a divorce. You don't need to feel bad about that. That's actually a big opportunity. Oh, your partner's having an affair? You don't have to feel bad about that. And a lot of people look at that and go, how fucking dare you, Jeff? And they get angry at me. Because again, they're trying to hold on to this victim narrative that their partner is cheating on them, that their partner is wanting to divorce them, and they feel sad, they feel bad, and there's nothing that can be done about their partner having an affair. There's nothing that can be done about their partner wanting a divorce. There's nothing that can be done about how sad and hopeless they feel about it. And they want that narrative to continue, that there's nothing that can be done, because if in a separate reality they admit that, yes, my partner's having an affair is because I did something bad, and I can actually do something to increase my value right now. I can do something right now to make her not want a divorce in the future. I can do something right now to change my feelings. Now suddenly they can no longer use the excuse to do nothing about the problem, to blame their partner, to blame whatever it is they want to blame. Now they know that they're in control of the work. So if they do not change their emotions, if they do not save their relationship, if they do not prevent divorce, it's now on them, because they know they could be doing something about it. So do you see how there is this very a bit sick but very satisfying pleasure to playing victim? And the best way for you to know whether you're blind to some negative feelings that you have and blind to your power in changing the negative feelings is when you say, well, I feel what I feel. I can't help but feel that. Well, I already feel that. I don't know what to do about it, because that's how I feel about it. If you say variations of that, you are playing victim to that emotion. You're basically saying that I feel the feelings, and there's nothing I can do to change the way I feel about something. So either the world needs to accept it or fuck off, basically, right? But once you admit to yourself that you have power to actually do something to change the way you feel about something, and if you still don't do it, now you cannot play the excuse of not being blamed for doing nothing about your feelings. Now you can only have yourself to blame for doing nothing about those feelings. So once you accept that you can change feelings, that's a very difficult but very fruitful but very difficult admission to make. The third reason why people remain blind to this is that you can unintentionally create an environment where you make yourself more blind to this over time. And I made a post on this in the a video ago, but I used to do this too, where I would destroy so much safety in my partner, so much safety to the point where whenever she would notice that I was doing something wrong or doing something that hurts her, she wouldn't actually tell me anything about it. So I could be saying a lot of things that hurts her feelings, gaslighting her, but she would never go back to me and say, hey, you're gaslighting me. Hey, that hurts my feelings. So as I destroy safety over time, the number of feedback and the number of like call outs she has about me lessens. And as I see that the call outs about me lessens, I have this false perception that, hey, maybe I'm doing something right. Maybe I'm doing something good. But the reality was that she wasn't not critiquing me because I was doing great things, but it was really because I was doing something so terrible that no one could even feel safe to even tell me how wrong I was being. And so a lot of people, when they're emotionally vulnerable and they destroy safety with their emotional vulnerability, what can happen is that they can destroy a lot of safety and they can never really understand just how toxic their emotional vulnerability could be because no one ever gives them that feedback. So to me, saying to someone that you just need to be more emotionally vulnerable without teaching them internal shift is like giving a sword to the untrained. It's very dangerous. So this video, for example, is saying that, hey, what would be more attractive to a woman? A man who is all stoic all the time, very masked and very guarded, or someone who can express without worry, without fear, etc., which is not a wrong principle in itself, but if you present it like that, it makes a lot of people feel like, oh, in order to save my relationship, all I need to do is just express myself more. I can tell you that that is the last thing your partner wants right now. The last thing your partner wants right now is for you to express, be more vulnerable about your true thoughts, because it's your true thoughts that has really gotten you in trouble. And a lot of my clients who have come from other programs, learning these principles and coming to ours has realized just how much this has backfired on them in destroying safety, admiration, alignment, and passion. Because we have to understand that, if you were here, if you're watching this video, usually you've gotten your partner to the point where they're wanting to leave. And I want you to understand just how far you have to push someone to get to the point where they want to leave. So think about this, right? Your partner eventually, in the beginning, chose you and chose you alone. And think about you choosing someone to spend the rest of your life with someone. And what would it take you to get to the point where on day one, you wanted to spend the rest of your life with one person, and on day 700, for example, you want nothing to do with this person. In fact, if you don't see this person or talk to this person ever again, you're okay with that. Think about how far you would have to be pushed to get there. And so we have to understand that if your partner wants to leave, you must have destroyed a lot more safety than you think. And if you don't think so, if you still think you have some semblance of safety, then why would your partner want to leave? Because think about it for yourself here. If you are facing problems in a relationship, but you know that the person you are with you can express stuff with, you can listen to, you have enough admiration to kind of work through problems together, you have the faith that you can align goals together, would you leave because of the problems? Of course not. You would work through it. You would leave only when you find yourself in this catch-22, when you have a problem, but you don't feel safe to express it. And even when you express it, you don't feel safe that you can actually align on it. That catch-22 is why you would leave. And why do people feel this catch-22? Because the safety is majorly broken. Think about it. Pause and really think about this. So if you have destroyed safety, it's really usually because you've let the big 14 mind viruses poison the tiny things you say, you do, your micros. You have to understand that right now, if you are watching this video, most likely being more emotionally vulnerable is probably one of the last things you need to focus on right now. And so let's go into the topic of what do we need to focus on then. So let's talk about the 5 steps to healthy emotional vulnerability. So the first step to being emotionally vulnerable is that you have to understand that being emotionally vulnerable is a very much a falling outcome. So trying to force emotional vulnerability is a mistake. You need to work on the precursor processes to allow yourself to naturally be more vulnerable. What do I mean here? In life, and I've said this in many videos, there's 2 kinds of outcomes. There's striving outcomes and there's falling outcomes. With striving outcomes, think about weightlifting. The more willpower you exert to it, the more weight you can lift, the more outcomes you get. But there are many things in life that is falling outcomes. Think about sleeping, think about resting, think about falling in love. The more willpower you exert to sleeping, the less likely you are to sleep. That's a falling outcome, right? So anything that deals with emotions is usually a matter of falling outcomes. This is why our masculine brains really struggle with understanding and mastering romantic relationships and emotions, because the masculine brain is very striving, but it's not very falling. So we often try to fix emotional issues, to fix romantic relationship issues with striving approaches by doing, while we need to basically do a different approach where we create the right environment to allow your partner to fall, not to strive to an outcome, to let your partner, to let the outcome fall. It's also why a lot of men, they try very hard, but the ironic part is that the harder they try, the less likely they are to get the outcome. The outcome seems to go further away from them. And I see this a lot with many men complaining about the relationships and saying, like, I've tried everything, I've tried so hard, but she doesn't want to come back, so I give up. Well, the problem is that you tried hard, and you trying hard with a striving approach is actually going to push you further away from the outcome. So when we talk about emotional vulnerability, we need to understand that emotional vulnerability is a falling thing too. You need to allow yourself to fall for emotional vulnerability and not to strive to be more vulnerable. Whenever you try to strive to be more vulnerable, the vulnerability doesn't become genuine. It becomes forced. It becomes, you can tell it comes with strings attached. And you will know this when someone is trying to express to you something, someone is telling you something, but you know them telling you that thing is coming from a striving place. You can smell something is off. You can smell, like, you can't put your finger on it, but you can smell something is off. But you can also sense when someone is sharing with you something and it feels very genuine, it's because they're coming from a falling place, not a striving place. When it comes to emotional vulnerability, you have to understand that the way you get there is not by trying to express more. It's actually, you need to work on the roots, on the precursor processes. When you work on those precursor processes, your emotional vulnerability will come much more naturally. The same way when you're sleeping, for example, you don't try to sleep. You just turn off your computer, follow your process. Turn off your computer, no more blue screens, turn down your lights, do some meditation, do some breathing, for example, read a book, do some calming activities, think about nice things, right? Have your sleeping routine. And once you focus on that routine, then the sleeping comes much more naturally. But as long as you try to sleep, you cannot fall asleep. The same thing with emotional vulnerability. You just focus on the processes, the precursor processes, and that will naturally allow you to become more vulnerable. So what are these precursor processes? The first thing is you got to work on the internals, the right what, how, and why. Because you won't help but be emotionally vulnerable in the wrong ways if your internals are not optimal. You must work on your internals first. So we talk about this again, that every action you do is because of how you feel about something. And so if you feel negatively about something, you will usually default to negative actions. And sure, like in the example I gave earlier, you might logically understand what the right actions are, but you just cannot bring yourself to do the right actions if you feel the wrong things. And if you feel the wrong things, it's usually because of the way you interpret something or because of the paradigms in which you see the world. So if you want to fix this action, which is you want to be more emotionally vulnerable to the correct things, then you need to work on this paradigm level. You need to make sure that you do not have the big 14 mind viruses and you have the right internal shifts. So if you look at a lot of the comments that I screenshotted before, a lot of it will be saying, for example, my weakness is emotional safety. I get very impatient. I get super defensive. And these guys know, they're aware of the problems, but they cannot help but keep doing it because they haven't changed their internals. So here they're trying to be vulnerable to create safety in this very striving way, but they cannot do it because they're not focusing on the precursors, the internal shifts that allows the right vulnerability to come up much more naturally, if that makes sense. And you also have to know the right precursor skills to these internals. So in that video, in that series about internal shifts, we talk about things like SOC, seat of consciousness, emotional literacy, empathetic thinking, having a quiet mind, growing overall self-esteem. These can do wonders for healthy emotional vulnerability. Because, for example, if I SOC, state of consciousness, and I have gotten used to really observing my own emotions, the world's emotions, other people's emotions, I can be vulnerable about much healthier things, about in a much deeper way, in a much more genuine way, in a much more enlightening way than a man who's never observed emotions, who can just say, I feel good, I feel bad, like caveman style, right? If that's the only thing you can say, then there's nothing to be vulnerable about. Same thing with emotional literacy, same thing with empathetic thinking. The more of the precursor skills you have, again, the higher likelihood that your emotional vulnerability will take place naturally, but also the right kinds of emotional vulnerability will take place naturally as well. And guys, these skills must be learned in the right order too. Just like when you're building anything, you must have the right foundations before building downstream processes. Not doing this or not working on the foundations first before you work on the later processes is just a recipe for disaster. So we talk a lot about in our program about support groups, for example, whether it's good or bad. And support groups, when it can be good if led properly, and support groups can be bad if it's led in the wrong way. So I've been to some support groups where the things you can express, the things you can say are heavily filtered. And that's a good thing because, if people are in these support groups, they're in the support groups for a reason. Maybe it's for alcohol, maybe it's for addiction, some other addiction, anger problems, whatever it is. But is their mind are used to seeing things in such a different way, in such a negative way, that lends them prone to these anger problems, that lends them prone to these alcohol problems. So if you just let people say whatever they want to say in the support groups, it will end up being a circle jerk of just someone saying negative, someone saying negative, on saying negative on top of that, negative top of that, on top of that. So here, the problem is that because they haven't learned the right internal shifts first, right? And they're focusing on emotional vulnerability here, in the support groups, but they haven't fixed their paradigms, the way they see the world, they're now emotionally vulnerable about the wrong things, which further fuels the fire. And same thing for journaling, right? In order for you to journal properly, you need to get rid of the big 14, because if you haven't done that, you're going to end up journaling very victim things, very tethered things, very mind virus things. And journaling can actually make you angrier and angrier and angrier. Same thing for SOC. In order for you to meditate properly and observe your thoughts properly, you actually have to understand how to interpret those thoughts that you're observing properly. Because if you are observing your thoughts and you don't know how to interpret that, you haven't learned the precursor skills to observe your thoughts properly with the right paradigms, you can end up driving yourself even more crazy. So again, meditation, journaling, support groups, they're all good but you have to understand the precursor skills to understand how to meditate, to understand how to journal, what to journal about, and to understand how to conduct yourself in support groups, for example. So let me just show you a sneak preview of what can happen when you apply this to real life challenges here. So, for example, I know a lot of you guys are watching this video are dealing with affairs, and I don't know what it is, but whenever I bring up the concept of affairs, people go fucking crazy and they start to like hate on me for saying that affairs are not necessarily all your partner's fault. It's not that black and white. Again, I've made so many videos on this on why I think of it that way. But so I won't belabor that point too much, but here goes, right? So for a lot of people, the way they think about, the way they interpret an affair is with a lot of FA bias, with a lot of equal blame illusion, with a lot of hopeless illusion. And they say things like, for example, they blame their partner for being disloyal. They blame their partner for not appreciating them. They blame their partner for betraying the relationship, even though they made vows or promises, whatever it is. And they have all these like big 14 mind viruses. And because of that, the action that they take is always very negative. But for my clients, for example, whenever they are facing an affair, their action is they say something like this, for example. So I know you're seeing someone else right now. look, I'm not going to spend all this time pointing blame or putting labels on whatever. Uh, if I reflect back on a relationship, I think if I'm honest with myself, I think there's a lot of things I could have done better in my own relationship. Um, and I think if I was the amazing husband or the best husband that I could be, I don't think I don't think you would be driven to leave anyway. Because to be honest, I think leaving and seeing someone else and having to face the backlash of other people critiquing you, me potentially critiquing you, abandoning maybe the kids that we have or the memories that we have, and going into the unknown and meeting some other people, that must not have been easy for you. So I know that um, I'm gonna take a look at just my 100% contribution to the 50%, and I'm gonna work on it. And if that's something that you want to wait for, or you want to watch, you want to view, that's fine. But if you don't want to see that and you want to explore this other relationship, that's totally fine too. But this is a journey for me, and I'm going to do this for me because I need to make sure that I don't fall short in any other areas of our relationship, whether that's with our kids or with future relationships with you or not you. It doesn't matter. I want to become a better person for myself. So there, right? Think about the number of different interpretations you would need to have about the affair, to see it in a less victim way, to see it in a less tethered way, and to see it much more healthier way as an opportunity for you to look at your flaws, look at your mistakes, to better yourself, to better your future, to really look at yourself honestly, etc. And to be honest, a lot of my clients also see affairs as an opportunity to really allow your changes to shine as well. So it's almost like, for a lot of my clients, for example, who are having affairs, it's actually because of the affair that their changes become more probable. The clients whose partners do not have affairs usually and who are stuck in this relationship, they have nothing to compare their changes to. So their changes often take longer to take hold or to be realized because they don't know what's out there. They're always like looking at the grass is always greener, but they haven't actually been to other lawns and see that the grass is not greener on other lawns. It just looks greener, kind of thing. And it's the same thing when you're faced with a lot of challenges and complexity. So I used to be, again, someone who, whenever I would be faced with a challenge, I would just mope around all day because I interpreted it very negatively. I felt very negatively, and I took very negative actions on that. And I was emotionally vulnerable about the wrong things. So now, whenever I'm faced with a challenge or complexity, sure, I do have that initial thought, very split second thought that, like, oh, this sucks. But whenever I face a challenge, whenever I face complexity, that is for me to have an opportunity for me to realize something, to learn something, to prove something, to show something. Right. So recently, for example, in my life, as you know, from the last update, we have major mold problems in our house. So half our house is currently under reconstruction again, under renovation again. We have a baby coming via IVF, so it's a lot of stuff you have to do there. I'm hiring new people in my company, right? We're going on our honeymoon soon too, which is a nice thing, but it adds a lot of work. We're dealing with a lot of family stuff right now. So there's a lot of stuff going on all at the same time, and it's all just getting up to us together. But to me, this whole challenge or this whole complexity has been an opportunity for me to show my partner just how poised I can be under pressure, just how well we can work together as a team during pressure moments. And this can create a lot of safety, while this opportunity would not have existed unless the challenge existed. So whenever I face a challenge now, I don't see that as a, oh my God, that sucks kind of thing. I see that as a wonderful thing. And so, yes, I'm vulnerable about my emotions, but whenever I'm vulnerable about my emotions about challenges, I'm always very positive. I'm always seeing its opportunities, and that creates a lot of safety. And that's the kind of vulnerability that my partner wants to see. Same thing when you're facing resistance, either from your partner or somewhere else, right? Whenever I face resistance, a lot of people just get very defensive and treat the resistance as something very inconvenient. But for me, whenever I get resistance, I actually thank my partner for giving me that resistance. Because to me, resistance is me being called out on my blind spot mistakes, for example, some things, points of delusion for me. And the way I respond to resistance tells her a lot about whether I've really changed the kind of man I am as well. So whenever I get resistance now, my initial instinct is not to shut it down or to get defensive. My initial instinct is to actually welcome it, to actually thank her for it, to actually show her and be vulnerable about what I truly think about the resistance, which is of it as a positive thing, as an act of bravery for my partner, as an act of vulnerability for my partner, as me creating more safety for her to be more vulnerable, for example. And I actually invite more of that. So in all these instances, either the negative side of the interpretation of the actions and the positive side, both of those are true. So for you to say, for example, like, oh, what I feel is what I feel, and I can't really change it, that's not true, because you can change the way you see something. And once you change the way you see something, you will change the way you feel about it. And once you change the way you feel about it, you will change your actions about it. Now, both feelings are true, but the point is that you can choose your truth. You can choose how you want to feel about something. If you feel negatively about something, just know that you are choosing to feel negatively about that, because you're choosing to interpret it in the way you're interpreting it, and you're not choosing to find other ways to interpret it. Because whenever you feel negatively about something, you can choose to interpret it differently and choose to feel differently about something. And either sides are true. It's just about which truth do you want to see. So I hope you think about this, because this can get very nuanced and very deep, but I hope you understand what I mean when I say emotional vulnerability is not just about expressing whatever comes to you. It's emotional vulnerability is about being emotionally vulnerable about the right things. And for you to do that, you need to be able to be in control of your paradigms, which and in control of your interpretations. And if you sense a negative one, you are able to switch it to a more positive one and be emotionally vulnerable about more positive, about more useful things. It's not just about expressing willy-nilly. And so the whole point of this video is that this concept of emotional vulnerability is a bit of a useless term. I think for a lot of you guys, um, if there's a reality where you did not learn this term called emotional vulnerability, I don't think anything would change. In fact, I think you'll be better off in that reality that you didn't learn silly buzzwords like this. Remember again that women don't just like vulnerable men. Okay? Women are not leaving you because you're not vulnerable enough. Okay? Women are leaving you because you're usually vulnerable about all the wrong things. Because women like strong men who are vulnerable, but you need to become strong first. And I'm not going to spend too much time in this video on this, but I've made a lot of videos around positive masculinity and high value man, what the definition, what that means. So this definition of strong, I think a lot of people have the wrong definition of what strong means also. So if you need to go to those videos, but you need to become stronger in the right ways and then be vulnerable. But vulnerability should not be your focus if you're not strong yet, if you haven't made your internal shifts yet. So the last thing I want to leave you with here is learn first principles, not buzzwords. There is a very good reason why we have outlined our program in the way we do, because we are forcing our clients to pick a path that forces them to learn principles, to learn deep principles and not tactics or buzzwords. So in our program, we have a whole section around systems and principles thinking, and we really lay it down for what systems and principles thinking actually looks like. And you've seen some of this in other videos that I have where I've debunked certain, popular terms around relationships. And another example of this is attachment styles in relationships, why they're useless and often toxic in relationships. And in this video, you'll see why this whole attachment styles, again, just like emotional vulnerability, it's not a term that you need. It's actually a term that confuses you a lot more. It's almost like if you consider primary colors, right? You have 3 primary colors, RGB. This is like you overcomplicating color theory by saying, oh, but purple is this, but orange is this, but yellow is this, but cyan is this, but turquoise is this. Dude, don't make it so complicated, right? You have 3 primary colors in which you can create all other colors. Turquoise, cyan, whatever it is, they're not new principles. They're just derivatives of these principles. So you have to understand here that success is subtractive, not additive. The failures are the ones who dilute their 24 hours by doing too much of everything. The successful ensure that they're doing the right few things with the same 24 hours. All of us, no matter if you're Elon Musk, myself, yourself, whoever, we all have 24 hours in a day. If you use the 24 hours right, you can let compounding effect be your friend. But if you spread yourself thin among useless concepts like emotional vulnerability, then you are going to make compounding effect into your enemy, because you're going to be on the wrong side of that, where you're going to see other people zoom past and you're going to be still at the bottom here. Okay. And so this is why I think, when I talk to so many people, they find this whole journey of saving relationships to be so confusing, to be so complex, to be so difficult. But if you are one of my clients, you just have very few principles that you need to pay attention to. You have the 5 pillars, and not even the 5 pillars, but you only need to focus on one pillar at a time. And before you focus on these 5 pillars, you need to work on the internal shifts. So learn auto-suggestions, learn identity shifting. That's it. You're not focusing on creating boundaries, on attachment styles, on love languages, on all these like buzzwords that don't really contribute much to your overall success, to be honest. Because at this point, we have helped thousands of people. And mind you, I'm going to sound a bit proud here, but with higher success rates than any other people in the industry by miles. I mean, think about how many people in this industry are able to do long-form interviews, as many as us right now. And long-form interviews, guys, are really, really hard to fake. I can fake Yelp reviews, I can fake Google reviews, I can fake articles, I can fake forum threads, but I cannot fake long-form interviews where the clients is going back and forth with me about complex principles. I cannot fake that. And I want you to name one person in this industry who does as many long-form interviews as they do us. It's very difficult. Not only do we have all these interviews published, but we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 that are scheduled within the next month of more interviews with people as well. So it just keeps coming, guys. And I can tell you that despite all the success, not once have we ever needed to explore other terms, other weird terms that people made up outside of the key first principles that we teach. That's it. It's actually, saving relationships is actually very, very simple. So do yourself a favor. Stop confusing and sabotaging yourself by listening to too many buzzwords. Remember that the more videos you watch, the more terms you learn, doesn't make you more successful, because success is subtractive, not additive. And learn the principles. And there's a reason why in my videos, I go very deep into the principles behind something. I don't teach you tactics a lot, because I want you to learn how to think differently, how to have different paradigms, how to learn the principles to allow you to not get fooled by shiny words, by great sounding words, and so on. Okay. So if you want to join a program that can allow you to learn these principles, the only principles you need, the simple principles you need to actually get you results that you can use to focus your 24 hours in a day to actually get you somewhere, join me in my masterclass on the 5 proven steps to rebuilding your relationship from the ground up. In that masterclass, I'll show you the exact steps all my clients that you see in the success interviews have used to get them from wherever state 0 was to wherever they are today. And at the end of the masterclass, I'll also show you how you can apply for the program if you're interested in doing so as well. But for now, guys, I hope that was helpful for you guys in understanding what's fact or fiction, what's real and what's not, what's actually useful and what is useless. And I'll see you guys in the next video.